everything is priceless. Okay, we're recording now. But, yeah.
Okay. Well, when my sophomore year, the coach used to have a scrimmage all the time. And so as a sophomore, we were scrimmaging against the varsity. And I remember I was playing out of position. He always thought I could be a defensive end, but I couldn't be a defensive end. Anyway, I went around, I'm going to, stop the play, break up the guy. The guy, I go down to make a tackle, and the guy hit me with his nose. And that nose was all over the place, and I had blood all over the place. I ruined my coat trying to go home. Blood was all over me. But I went to Key Club that night.
Of course, you guys didn't have face masks until what, your senior year, your junior year?
We never had face masks. I had one my senior year.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But it was like a cage. It wasn't nice like you have now.
Yeah, because the picture you have that one picture in your yearbook, you don't have a face mask on.
No, I didn't. And that was my senior year. I think they gave me a face mask, but it was like a cage, and I didn't like it because I couldn't see anything. So never wore it. Nobody ever had a face mask in those days. We were lucky to have helmets.
Leather helmets, almost like.
But then they went and they X-rayed my nose at the hospital, and they said, yeah, it was broken. And then they said, and it was broken once before. I didn't even know that. And they said, they finally said, you're probably going to get it broken again, so don't bother. Maybe after you're an adult and you want to get it fixed, then you can have it fixed. But the way to have to fix, they got to break it to fix it.
Yeah.
I said, forget it. Leave it the way it is. That's just one thing. Did I tell you about going out for track in my freshman year?
I thought you were a long jumper or something like that, if my memory serves me correct.
Yeah, well, when I was in they had the grammar school meet.
Yeah,
so it was
the all-city meet. Yep.
7th and 8th grades, and I went representing our school in the long jump.
Yeah.
And I came in third. I did 16.5. I remember that. Isn't that crazy? And then when I went
that's pretty good for an 8th grader.
Yeah. So, but when I got to high school and we went out for track, I went up there and I'm looking and I see these kids and they're jumping 17, 18 feet, and I'm thinking, so I'm trying to figure out I always think you gotta remember, because you guys were in the same boat. By the time when we were freshmen in high school, that was it. We never grew after that.
Right. Yep.
Nobody. And so, I mean, at 5'10" and 150 pounds, they thought I'd be, 180 pounds or 6 foot tall by the time I graduated. No such luck.
Yep.
So as the freshman, he said, "Oh, go over and try the javelin." I couldn't throw that thing anywhere, let alone thing. So finally, the coach is gonna run time trial, run the 800. And I said, well, let me try that out, because nobody can do that. And it was he was looking for somebody to do the 800, and so I just got in the back and I didn't know what to do. And there was a couple of guys I knew that were upperclassmen. I think they're both seniors, but anyway, I just got in, ran behind them, and then with about 200 yards to go, 300 yards to go, I just went by them and just kicked it in, and I won the race. That ain't too bad. So the coach did it again, and a couple of days later we did it. And I remember when I did the same thing, and I was going by this kid that's a senior. Said, "You're not doing that again." And I left him in the dust. And so that's how I ended up to be, and I told the kids one day at school that, I did it because that was where they needed somebody.
Right.
And I wasn't quite fast enough to make it in the sprint, and I wasn't going to be a thrower. And the long jump, I probably could have done all right in the long jump. Maybe if I tried to high jump even. I would tell you, in 4th grade, when they started that citywide track meet, I was in fourth grade.
Hmm.
In the fourth grade, they had the seventh and eighth graders, and then it was fourth, fifth, and sixth graders in the other one.
Oh, I didn't
And
know. Back in our day,
I-
it was only seventh and eighth grade.
yeah, well, they were that was the first year,
Yeah.
so they were still experimenting, and so they were doing the high jump, and I did the high jump that year, and I was doing, the kids said it was a cannonball. I just went up and threw myself over the bar. I think I did like 3 feet 6, but I didn't place. But anyway, one kid high jumping broke his arm. So that's why they weren't doing the high jump when you were in school.
Oh,
That was the only year they ever did the high jump. But it was an interesting experience. But I don't remember being in that meet fifth, sixth grade, seventh grade. I didn't until I got into eighth grade. And then it was and then
No,
I
in a KAB, you had to qualify, so you never know what may have happened because you had to be like in the top 3 of the school.
yeah, well, I remember we were running, they ran, I think, they ran a 4x100 or 4x200 at the end of the meet.
Yep, I
And
remember that.
the kid from our school, one of them dropped out, and I thought I should have been the one to put in there, but they put this kid who was actually 17 years old.
Yeah, hold your camera down just a little bit more so I get, there you go. That's it right there.
Yeah. But I don't like my red nose when I see that. I try to figure, I'm gonna have to powder it up the next
Yeah,
time.
you're going to be on film. You're going to kind of doll yourself up. Now,
Yeah.
was that Fort Trumbull that you were attending then?
Yeah, and somebody had posted about schools that don't exist anymore in Milford. Yeah, and I was at Fort Trumbull, fourth, fifth, and sixth. I was Fort Trumbull kindergarten through sixth grade.
Okay, 7th and 8th grade?
Seventh and eighth grade, you went to Central Grammar.
Went to Central. Okay.
Same with West Main Street School. That only went to sixth grade. Then you went to seventh and eighth.
Okay.
Devon went all the way through. Walnut Beach went all the way through. And the other school was just built, was
So
Point
did you
Beach.
walk to Central from Harkness?
I walked to school from the time I was a kindergartner.
Yeah. You literally walked to school both ways, up and back.
Oh, yeah, that seemed that way, but yeah, there was, I think, when we got to, it was maybe fifth grade, fourth. Remember, another thing that people don't know about is double sessions.
Right. You talked about that last time because you got the school, Milford's grown so much that you had AM and PM, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I always ended up with the PM sessions.
Right.
So fifth, sixth, and seventh grade, I didn't go to school until 12 o'clock, 12:30 in the afternoon. So I got to stay up late and watch TV.
Of course, television wasn't like it is now.
1 o'clock in the morning.
You'd stay up to 12 or something, and then it would go off back in the day.
Yeah. No, actually, there was at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, they'd have the news come on.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would be maybe 15, 20 minutes. It wasn't a long time. And then there was a program on at right after that. It was called, the guy's name was Jerry Lester. And it was pretty much like they have now. He was an old vaudeville guy.
Like a late night show with him, huh?
Yeah, just and then he had this girl on the show called Dagmar, and she was just kind of like a prop,
Yeah.
and then they'd have guests come in, and not too much different than what they have today. And they'd have little skits, and they had a band. The band was.
So yeah.
What was that guy's name that was on the band? I can't remember right now, but he wrote a couple of songs, and so it was and there was when I was in seventh grade, there was another girl in the class, and she stayed up too, and we used to talk about it. It was did you see that last night? Yeah, and then we talk about it.
Huh.
That's that kind of crazy thing.
So the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Yeah, right. Well, the double session was always a kind of a thing, because you had all morning free. but what could you do?
Right.
You know, and it was always, well, that reminds me, and maybe that, and I was thinking of this, because I was in 5th grade and it was in the afternoon. 4th grade must have gone in the morning. 3rd grade's when it went in the afternoon. So my sister was in 3rd grade and I was in 5th grade. So I don't know how long we did this. I'm going to ask my sister about it sometime. So once a week, her and I take a bus, and we take a bus to Bridgeport.
Hmm.
And then at
How
Bridgeport,
old were you now?
so I was 5th grade, whatever that is, what, 10,
Ah,
10,
10
11?
years old, going to Bridgeport, huh?
Yeah, with my 8-year-old sister.
Yeah, I'm saying, how old was Louise? Yeah.
Yeah, she's 2 years younger than me. So yeah, we take the bus and we go to Bridgeport. And then we get off the bus and we go into the hotel where my grandmother's sister had her studio.
Huh.
I never mentioned this before.
No,
She
this is a new one.
she taught what they called at that time elocution, which we would call public speaking, basically,
Right.
or pronouncing. I always remember she always correct me. It's not an empire; it's an umpire. Umpire, not empire. And one of those little things. But
Yeah.
that was what she taught, and she actually had clients, people that were lawyers and things would come to her to learn how to speak better. Can you
Huh.
imagine that?
So
And-
this
and
would
it-
have been who?
This would have been my grandmother's sister. Her name was Bernice,
Bernice. Okay.
Aunt Bernie, we called her. Yeah, and she had this studio, and so, and part of it. And this is an interesting thing too, that we would go over there and we would learn to recite poems and things like that. And it's not a big deal, but I guess it did help me. I remember I could recite the Gettysburg Address when I was in 5th grade.
There you
So
go.
the teacher was impressed on that one. But and then it would be just like any other thing. She'd have a recital at the end of the year.
Oh, wow.
And this is kind of a funny one because I think about it now. But so, and the recital was in the what's that place in Bridgeport, the big where they have shows, or they did at that time anyway. It was a big auditorium,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd go there. And I remember my aunt said, "Okay, we're gonna." I said, "Well, go. Can I do Casey at the Bat?"
Oh,
She said, "Oh no, I got another young fella. He's going to do Casey at the Bat. I got one just for you." I said, "Oh yeah." So she gave me this thing, and here couldn't get away with this one today. I'll tell you that. There was a guy. The guy goes on a train, and he's supposed to get off at Rochester. So he's going from New York to Rochester. So he says to the porter, he says, "I'm a heavy sleeper." He said, "I don't care what you do. You have to get me off the train in Rochester. Do whatever you have to get me off the train." And then this the porter said, "Yes, sir. I understand. Yes, sir. I understand. I'll get you off the train in Rochester." So it's a guy sleeping away. And then he said, "Buffalo, next stop."
oh,
So he goes for the porter. He finds the porter. He's all banged up. His clothes are torn and everything. He says to the porter, "What happened? I told you to get me off at Rochester." "You the man I was supposed to get off at Rochester? Who was that man I put off at Rochester?" Had to use the accents and everything, it wouldn't pass today.
Hey, I was noticing, I was doing a little family history work, and I didn't know this, or maybe I didn't remember it. So you share the same birth date, or March 5th, with your grandfather on the Schulte side with Carl?
I thought it was with my grandmother, Essie.
Well,
No,
let me
my
take a look.
grandfather. I know I did.
I think you and Carl have the same birthday.
I know there's one. Yeah, one of my grandparents on that side. I always, for some reason, thought it was my grandmother, but maybe it is my grandfather.
Let's take a look here.
Because him, I never knew.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you about. What's, what do you remember, if anything, about him?
No, I don't. All I know is the stories my mother has told me.
Okay.
about him
All right, here it is.
because,
Yeah, Carl Rogers. I'm Carl Schulte, excuse me, March 5th.
oh, okay,
But
I
and then,
guess I
and you
remember.
wouldn't, yeah, he passed away when, in 41, so you're just a kid. A little
Yeah,
bit.
well, he was an interesting person from my mother's side. He was in jail, and uh, because I think he was a pimp,
Mm,
and he had been in jail. But the funny thing with him is he got a job as a used car salesman at Real Motors in Bridgeport,
mhm.
and so he got a job selling used cars. And those days, you had, if you got a trade in, you had to sell the trade in then too. But anyway, he worked there, and now this is the end of the Depression. But he got my father a job there, and my father, I mentioned this, I think, to Chris the other day, Simonizing cars.
Yeah, you talked about that actually with me 2 weeks ago. That,
Okay, Simonizing cars.
yeah,
Yeah,
in
because
the
you said what's
underbelly of them and stuff like that and getting them ready.
yes,
Yeah.
what's Simonizing, huh? But then the thing is that, and I told you, and I guess I told you then that he got my Uncle Ray and my Uncle Ernie got jobs there too.
Yeah, so
That's
he's
where
been
we all
kind of
came.
transitioned. That's what we were talking about. Just as a record, then Essie May was a February 5th. That's probably where the 5th came.
Okay, so
So
the February 5th is Glen Ann's
Glen
birthday.
Ann's birthday, right? So
Okay,
there you go.
February.
There's those
Okay.
connections. But
Well, I guess what I remember is that once when I was probably 8, 9 years old, I got a birthday card with like $5 in it, which was a lot of money from my grandmother, Essie.
mhm.
And I guess I linked that with her remembering it was the 5th of March, and I thought that's why she remembered it because it was her birthday too. But
Yep. So there you go. So now the first video that didn't work out for us, let me kind of see if I can point you in that direction a little bit, is you kind of went over just like when you were born, living down, on broad on the beach and stuff. And so we need to recapture some of those things
well,
because I lost that video. So you want to go if you can
yeah,
kind
go
of
back.
force yourself, go back in that direction, back to the very beginnings.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I, I remember when Abby lived here, and I'm thinking to myself, will she actually remember anything
Yeah.
from when she was at? I mean, how far back can you actually remember when
Right.
you were 3? Maybe 1 or 2 incidents, but I can remember that we when I was born, we went and lived with my grandparents, and I told you all about the house where
Yeah, but and that now that was the house down on the beach.
yeah, by the dump.
Yeah,
We
but
actually
you might want to tell that one again because that's the video we lost.
Okay, so the house, um, we when I say we, my mother, my father, and my brother and I lived had a bedroom on the front of the house on the second floor. Well, we were over the porch, so there was no insulation no insulation over us, nothing on either side except the back side, which is the rest of the house was. But so that was it, and I can remember that. And then remember when it was so cold, up there was no heat up there really,
Right.
because they had the heat in that house was the kitchen um, wood stove they had in the kitchen. Then they had an oil space heater in the living room, and that was it. So any heat that went upstairs, maybe. Uh, so we didn't have it. And then in those times we had, I can remember, I don't know how often we used them, but they had these blocks. And what they would do is they'd heat up the block and we carry it upstairs and then run it between the sheets and then jump in quick before it got cool. And
You know what
so
the
that's,
blocks are made of? Were they just like concrete or what were they
no,
made?
there was some kind of a clay or something
So
that
they
I can't
retain
remember.
the heat.
So I think they called it a soapstone or something. It was, solid, but it retained the heat. In fact, I was just reading, I'm reading the history of, uh, yeah, Orson Hyde,
Mhm.
because Orson Hyde is a local guy.
Right.
We always talk about Wilford Woodruff from Connecticut. Orson Hyde was from Oxford, so he was closer. But I reading about him, and he was talking about when the temple, the Kirtland Temple, had no heat,
Oh, wow.
and they would bring in things like that, stones, heated stones, and everything to keep themselves warm in the wintertime when there were meetings in the temple. But anyway, that's just a sideline. But anyway, I remember.
Yeah, I just looked
when,
it up on Google, and that's what a soapstone. Unique heating stirring ability allows you to heat it in the evening and enjoy a slow release of heat all night long.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
There you
that's
go.
it. So, it was a soapstone. Yeah, and I can remember we put them in the bed with us, and as I remember, we just rubbed them up the sheets, got everything warm, the bedding warm, and then you just got in, you
Yeah.
know. And but after that, then but that house, my grandparents lived. They had a bedroom,
Say that.
and
I'm losing you a little bit. Hang on,
there
Dad.
was another bedroom up
Okay.
in the winter. Okay. In the wintertime, he'd have icicles in his room. It was so cold up there. But it was just a summer home, and my grandmother got it, so that's where they lived. And then I we lived there, and then I was telling you, I told you about Larry Mitchell, and his father came to live with us because um, his wife left him, and he talked my grandmother into taking him in, and she left Larry and Ernie Mitchell with us, took the daughter and went off with a new guy. Yeah, that's something we want to look at someday. I try to find information. My Uncle Charlie, my great Uncle Charlie, my
Right.
grandfather's
Brother.
brother,
Yeah.
he was married to Aunt Ruby, who was she was gone before you ever got up to the farm, but she was
Ruby. Yeah. I've got the,
she
yeah.
was yeah. Anyway, but they had 4 daughters, and I've tried to find information on their 4 daughters. I can't find anything. I can find one was baptized in the Congregational Church, but the other 3 I can't find anything. And of course, they got married, so they had married names, and so I tried it a couple of times just to try and figure out, instead of going, in other words, instead of going backwards, I was trying to go sideways.
Yeah. We definitely need to look into, get into that one for sure.
Yeah. But anyway, in those days, my grandfather farmed the farm, but he didn't live there.
Right.
My Uncle Charlie and Aunt Ruby lived at the house, and the 4 daughters. And my grandmother wouldn't live with my Aunt Ruby. Aunt Ruby was tough. We couldn't. She yelled at everybody. She never did anything. So that's why Grandpa'd get up in the morning. He'd have to start the stove. This is even when we lived on Harkness Drive. He'd get up in the morning at 6 o'clock, and then he would go down and start up the furnace, wood coal furnace in the house, and he'd get up and then he'd go to work. He'd drive to the farm and then farm, and then come home at lunchtime, stoke the furnace again, then go back to the farm. And he'd have lunch when he came home too.
Right.
But he worked the farm, but he didn't live there, so it was kind of a odd situation. And that was even when that was always the way it was. It was always that way. And anyway, I lived in that house with them, and I can remember crazy things like it must have been a sand pile from the '38 hurricane that was over by the dump. And I
Right.
remember we'd go over there and play in this big sand pile, with our cars and everything, And then Lester and I, in the summertime, we go to the beach. It was
Yep.
just across the street, no supervision, just go over and play.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I think.
So when we were gone for the day, that's just the way it was. Like, so when we would take off or go down to Boxford Ave or something like that, or go down to the
Yeah.
no
But
harm,
then-
no foul. That's just the way you did it.
Yeah, and we were only 4 and 6 years old. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, but it was like walking to the playground.
Right.
Was no big deal in those days, and things that I remember too is, must have been later on, a little later on. I think I told you the story. Well, let me repeat it anyway. When the war broke out, my father would do anything not to go into the service.
Right.
And so he knew, so he had a connection somewhere, and he got a job as a, what you want to call a security guard, I guess, on the railroad tracks. So he was responsible for making sure they didn't sabotage the trestle going over the Housatonic River.
Right.
Anyway, that was supposedly his job. So that was good. So he was, that way he wouldn't, then he had, when 1940, Louise was born. So there was 3 kids, and so they weren't going to draft him, So,
Right.
but he wanted to make sure. And I don't know if that time too, my mother used to work at one of those stands down the beach. Was the beach still in existence when you were down there? The down at corner of Naugatuck Avenue and East Broadway. Was there anything down there then?
No, when I was a kid growing up, you saw relics of the leftovers.
Yeah.
You
Well, there
know,
used to be an amusement park down there.
right. And you saw some relics of the leftovers, but it wasn't functioning when we were kids.
Yeah. Well, when in the 40s, it was still operating. It was a great place, and they had all these little hot dog stands. And my mother worked at a hot dog stand called Panucci's, and it was very interesting. He was an interesting guy, big Yankee fan. In fact, you read about him one time where actually he was such a big Yankee fan that Spec Shea, who lived in Naugatuck, brought a bunch of the Yankees, Yogi Berra, and I think Whitey Ford and a couple of the other guys to Panucci's for a hot dog because he was such a big fan. My mother wasn't there at that time though, but she worked there. And I remember my brother and I, sometimes we walked to the movie theater down at the corner of Naugatuck and Broadway.
Yeah. And all that stuff was closed down. So that would have been, right. Because we had to, like when we were kids, right? The dump is right there. So to get to the other side, you kind of had to walk around to get, which wasn't Silver Sands, obviously, then. It was just the dump. So you had to, you got all the way up to Naugatuck, and then there was no way you had to walk around, right, to get to the other side of Broadway because of the dump.
Yeah, Chris and I were talking about is when did they close? In other words, you could go down East Broadway on the other side.
Right.
And, then you'd hit what they call the dump road, right?
Yep, exactly.
Then that would end.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so when I was driving taxi, which was back in 75, 74, 75, you could still go down all the way down East Broadway.
Okay.
So it must have been sometime after that they closed off the dump road, so you couldn't go through.
And then it wasn't too much longer because by the time, I want to say by the time I graduated, so it's 78-ish, then, you go by Robert Treat Apartments and everything. And there was so sometimes those 4 or 5 years it was built through, I thought that you could drive through or something.
No.
Nope.
No, I don't think so. Maybe you could if you went up the dump road and then came back down, maybe.
Yeah, there was
That's
a way. I
Chris
don't know
and
what the time frame is, but I can't remember. Maybe it was after I got back from my mission, so 81-ish,
Yeah.
something like that. But you could get
correct.
through there.
Yeah, you could get through. We'll go down with Nettleton Avenue was. Yeah. But anyway, my brother and I we walk down to Panucci's and see my mother and get some money to go to the movie theater. It was called the Colonial down at the corner there, and I mean we could only been 6, 7 years old, but you didn't think anything about it. You go, kids were all over the place, even at 7, 8 years old. They weren't, there wasn't that fear as there is today. Well, even when you kids were little, you wandered the neighborhood.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. We would just be gone. So it wasn't until our generation, our kids. When did Grandma start working for the phone company?
Well, that's a good question too, because I think I mentioned this the last time we talked, and I was talking to my mother, and I could never really figure this out, because we moved to Harkness Drive.
Yeah, you said we got that last video. We got that you got the house. You really couldn't figure out quite how she
How-
had the down
how
payment for the house and,
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah, because she wasn't even working when she got the
Right.
house. But she managed to get the house. I think it was part of it was it was like the last one, and it wasn't a good location, and it was a tough one. So I think they were just trying to get rid of it. So they figured if she defaulted on it, take it back and sell it again. But she managed it. But I don't. And then she got a job at what they called the garter shop. You know what garters are.
No.
In those, no, back in the old days, and even when we first joined the church, men wore stockings that they had to hang up with the garters.
Oh, okay.
They'd have a garter on their leg, and then they'd have to hold their socks up. And and of course, women had garter belts for their long stockings,
Right.
but guys actually had garters then. So there was a factory down on Factory Lane that actually manufactured garters. And that's where my mother worked, because I can remember as a kid, sometimes, I don't, you wonder how often you did something. Did you do it once? Did you do it once a week? Did you do it
Right.
10 times? Who knows? But I remember walking up and meeting my mother, coming out of the garter shop once in a while and walking home with her. And walking home with my mother was like a jog for us, because she moved.
Yeah.
I mean, she you go, and I always laugh, and I think sometimes that my mother would be walking, and Lester and I'd be horsing around. She'd walk like she didn't know who those two kids were. But that's what she had. And then she got a job at the telephone company. Some of the people she knew. In fact, there was 2 or 3 people that lived on Harkness Drive that worked there. One of them was, but she had a hard time getting the job because she was left-handed.
Oh.
Because everything was built for
Everything is
right-handed
built
people.
for right-handed. Yeah.
Yeah, but there was no equal what I call accommodations in those days.
Yeah. Exactly. Make it work.
And yeah, but she somehow made it work, and she was good. I mean, she knew she could pronounce any name in the book, in the telephone book. You look at them and you say, how's that name pronounced? And she didn't rattle it right off. She knew, and she knew where everybody, because in those days, you had to go through an operator to make a phone call.
Right.
You'd pick up your phone, and the operator would say, number, please. And all she had was Milford. And after a while, she knew right where everybody was after a while. I think if I remember correctly, that the Ford Trumbull had like a 2-digit number. It was number 54 or something like that. And in those days, you had party lines too.
Right.
Because it was the end of the war. And, you had 3 or 4 parties on your line. And it wasn't soon after that you could get a private phone. But even then, it cost a little bit more. But by that time, my grandparents were living with us,
So
But
how many digits that when you got your private line, how many digits would that be?
That's when they came up with the 3-digit, 4-digit, and
Okay.
everything. And it was with it was a word, and then so ours was Trinity 41432.
Huh.
That was the number. Well, you remember, if you hear the what's his name? The trombone player, the music. I just saw his name now. But anyway, Pennsylvania 65000.
Right. Yeah.
That was how all the numbers were. New York had Pennsylvania, Murray Hill,
Right.
things like that. In Milford, everything was Trinity. And then if you look at it, when you were a kid, it was 878
878 or 874.
87 is Trinity.
Yeah.
Yeah, 87 is TR.
Yeah. Because our number was 878-3852.
Yeah. Well, the 87 is TR.
Huh.
And I don't know why they didn't start it with number. They used words instead. And they used the first 2 letters of the word as the part of the number.
So
But
was it
anyway.
around the 1950-ish, early 50s that she went to work there then? Would that be
No,
about right?
no, it was before that.
Okay,
It was probably, it wasn't too long because I don't remember my mother working at the garter shop for too long.
too long, okay.
And then, and the things to remember about that too is when she worked there, it worked out good for her because they had oddball shifts.
Mhm.
And if you work nights, night shift was 5 to 11 or 6 to 12. I don't know what happened after 12 o'clock. You know, they must have had some kind of people that work regular, like 12 to 7 or something.
Right, some,
Because
yeah.
because
graveyard. Mhm.
she would work a lot of those 6 to 11 to 5 to 12 because you'd only work 6 hours,
Mhm.
but you get 8 hours pay.
Okay, okay.
And the other one they had a split shift. What was it? It was a morning and night. It was 5 to 9. No, it was 9 to 1 or 6 to 10 or something like that. It was 9 to 1, yeah, 4 hours, 6 to 10. So you go to work at 9 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock, you go home. And we'd come home from school, she'd be home, but at 6 o'clock, she'd go back to work.
Huh.
And then it was the same thing. But you know, it's something that you don't even think about until, you know, later in life. Like my mother was never home on Christmas Eve. Because if she worked Christmas Eve, she worked 6 to 12. She'd not only get 8 hours pay, she'd get double pay. Because she'd get paid for the holiday, plus she'd get paid for working.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, but as a kid, you don't think of it. You didn't really notice it. You know, there was a lot going on. And stuff.
So when Dot worked for the telephone company for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did Grandma get her the job? Was there a connection that way at all?
Well, I didn't really get her the job. She told her about it.
Okay.
And then Mom got, you remember Jimmy Cater,
Mhm.
the Caters? Yeah. Well, Mom got Helen Cater, Jimmy's mother, a job there too.
Because I mean, we have the home video that one Christmas day where Mom's going off to work on Christmas Day.
Yeah, you're driving the Corvair.
And the Corvair, yep, exactly. Yep.
The Corvair, the little red white car.
Yep.
That was good in the snow. That car was good in the snow.
Well, you know, Ralph Nader didn't
Yeah,
like
it
it,
is.
but it was with the engine in the back, you got weight back there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember taking that car through some big snow drifts and stuff. Really, that
Well,
was
we
thing.
can talk about this
But anyway,
another
back
time,
to-
but you know, getting activated in the church and going to, you know, Trumbull in the Corvair with all of us, you know, 8 of us packed into that thing. And I think Scott was in the window well in the back.
yeah, with the hole in the front and getting the fumes.
Yeah, you had the little hole
Yeah,
in the body. I mean, I think the little holes on the floor of that thing. So
That's right. Yeah, right.
yeah. So Grandma worked there. Okay, and then what year did she retire?
Well, the thing is that Mom worked there, and it was okay for the first couple of years, but then when the dial system came into being,
Right.
so that would have been I don't know when, but maybe even before the dial system, they moved everybody out of Milford. I think
Okay.
it was the dial system came in. So the dial system was installed. It was in that building on High Street. But when that came in, my mother had to transfer. It would transfer. She could either go to Bridgeport or to New Haven. And she chose to go to the Bridgeport.
Okay.
And then so what she would do is she would have to take the bus because she didn't drive.
Right.
So you had 2 options. You had the bus that went along the shore, but it took you like an hour and a half to get to Bridgeport. Or you could take the Post Road bus.
Right.
You'd have to walk up to the corner on Bridgeport Avenue and take that bus. And I think that bus was supposed to go from New Haven to Bridgeport in an hour.
Oh, okay.
And you would stop all along the way.
That's
But
that's pretty fast if you think
yeah,
about it. You know,
and of course, there wasn't as much traffic in those days.
right.
So they could get up and maintain a pretty good speed without, there wasn't all those traffic lights and everything,
Right. Okay.
but things you remember. But I remember, the only thing is that the shore bus, that was the one my sister and I would take to Bridgeport when we went to see my aunt and Bernie. And the things you remember, I remember, and the bus driver would stop at Naugatuck Avenue just before you get onto Bridgeport Avenue in Devon.
Yep.
And he'd go in there. There was a little delicatessen, not delicatessen, called it a sweet shop. Guy had coffee and stuff there.
Right.
He'd go in there and have his coffee in the morning. I guess as long as he was running on schedule. He was running behind
Okay, huh?
schedule and stop.
So
But
let me ask you this. So when did Grandma and Grampy's get, what year was it they got divorced? So when did Grampy kind of fade away?
well, that's another story and a half because um, my mother had filed for divorce before she bought the house on Harkness Drive. So
That
it was
makes sense.
45. She
Mhm.
had already filed for divorce in 45, but she actually didn't get the divorce, I think, until either the fall of 45 or maybe even in the spring of 46 before she actually got the divorce. And she said that, in those days, it wasn't easy. It
Right.
wasn't like it is today, especially for a woman to file for divorce and, get it. But she had, and especially since, she bought the house, my father would come and try and stay there, and then, yeah, well, they're back together, and that kind of stuff I think she had to deal with. But what she had is it was my father had his girlfriend that had the baby, and they were renting a room in Bridgeport. And the woman that was renting the room to my father and his girlfriend, his wife, I guess at the time, I don't know, Maisie, I guess they weren't married yet. But anyway, she actually testified for my mother
Oh,
that my father had left us. And so she got her divorce. And that was, I think, like I say, either late 45 or early 46.
so
It's
you
probably
have
a record somewhere.
so you have a half sister then?
A half brother.
Okay. What
Yeah,
was his name?
his name is Edward Lester.
Schulte?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
And he's the same age as Willie, as my brother.
Well, there you go. It's
When my mother when my mother was pregnant with Willie,
uh-huh.
my father got the woman up the corner pregnant.
Okay.
And that's how my mother got her divorce because he had gotten her pregnant. And this Edward Lester is just a little bit younger than my brother Willie.
And did he ever marry this other woman, Missy?
Yeah, he married Maisie. Her
Maisie.
name was Maisie. And then they moved to Maine. My father always thought, easy life. He was going to have a chicken farm
Mhm.
because you go up there and you didn't have to do anything. Chickens laid eggs, you could sell the eggs.
Right.
But it was work too. But so they went to Maine. And then about the time that Mom and I got married, he was back in Milford.
I was going to ask, that was my next question. When did he come back? Because
Yeah,
when we grow up and we're on Sumner and my memory is him, staying with Lester. and my
Yeah, well,
parents over there.
he came back somewhere in the 50s, late 50s, because he was there when Mom and I got married. Because I'll get your car. This is something he called a couple of times, but he never did anything. But then, and you knew about Lester's first wife, right?
Brenda?
You remember Brenda, right?
Oh, yeah, I remember
Yeah.
Brenda.
Well, my father was living with her mother.
Now that I didn't know.
You didn't know? Yeah, that's how they. I can never figure out my brother at that point in time. He graduated from high school, and he was, I think, working at the garage, and he was hanging out. And he was hanging out at this bar down on Independence Street in the beach.
Yeah.
When the beach was still and so he's hanging out at this bar, and that's where he met. He's hanging out with my father,
Okay,
I could never understand that. I mean, it was my father that deserted us. What's he doing with him, you know?
right, yeah,
But my father's, I don't know if he was, we never knew if he was married to the woman or not. I forget what her name is now. But anyway, but she had a daughter, and Lester hooked up with the daughter.
now she was
And
very
then
young, she was like 15 or something when they got married,
yeah, I think,
you know?
yeah, when they got married, she was only, I think, 14.
Okay, I knew she was pretty young, but,
Yeah, they went to North Carolina to get married.
okay,
And then that's when Michael came in,
right.
same age as you. You know?
Yeah, because I sent Michael about a month or two ago, where Real is on Facebook, but the picture of our kindergarten day.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. And she said, where did you get that? He said, Michael had never seen that picture before.
Whoops, my battery's going out.
Okay, well, this is a good time. So next time we come, we're going to concentrate, maybe talk about high school years and meeting mom.
Oh, okay. So that we'll do in 2 weeks.
Yep, we'll do it in 2 weeks. Enjoy the wedding with the guys. Tell everybody we said hi, and tell Grace and congratulations.
Okay, talk to you later then.
All right. Thanks, Dad. That was great.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.